Okay guys, let's go ahead and see what we can do with this sweater in the way of unzipping the seams. So just know that this is a tutorial in the sense that I'm showing you how to do something, but it is definitely not coming from an expert. This is only the second time I have ever unzipped the seams of a sweater, so I'm just going to show you what I did and what worked for me. So you can kind of take it or leave it. If it's helpful, then great. If it's not really helpful, I'm sure there's lots of other places out there to find information on unzipping a sweater, but until I am an expert, this is the best that I can do for right now. But I definitely think that as the host of this knit along, it is kind of part of my duty to at least show you what I've done that has worked for me. So this is a sweater that works out in the sense that it has good seams. This is the right side of the sweater. It's just a cabled sweater with some lace work. It's really pretty, but right now I just want to use this as a sweater to show you how to unzip the seams. So I'm going to first start out by turning it inside out. Okay, so I have my sweater inside out. What I'm looking for to make this exceptionally easy is a crocheted seam or a crocheted stitch running up the length of the seam, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to start with one of the sleeves. I always start at a sleeve cuff. That is the best place to start, and here I will show you what that crocheted seam looks like. So I'm going to turn this up to the light, and you can see the little chain running along the seam of this sleeve. And it's just right here, and it runs all along the seam, and it looks like little V's of a chain, and that is a crocheted seam, and that's going to make this really easy to unzip the pieces of the sweater. So that's what you want to see. You want to find that little V-shaped chain, and you want to see it everywhere. So here's another one. So you can see that chain running along the bottom of the seam there. That's what we're looking for. So if we have that, then we are good to go. So we're going to go ahead and start with a cuff of the sweater. So we're going to start here, and we want to take the cuff and put the seam of the cuff on top, kind of move everything else out of the way. Now that little chain that runs along the side of the seam, it comes all the way down, and when it's being sewn shut, it comes all the way down and extends past the cuff. And it looks almost like a little chain link that comes past the cuff, and then it is woven into the cuff. Or into the seam of the cuff. So what we want to do is take our finger and feel around down here until we find a bulge in the seam, and that's going to be where the chain was woven in. And I can actually see right here in my cuff there is some thread that's kind of sticking out of the cuff, and that, some of it might come off, but if I pull on that, I'm actually going to be able to reveal that chain that we're looking for, except I need to unweave it from the seam and pull it out through the bottom of the cuff. So what I'm going to do is just kind of gently tug on that and see if I can find the source of that chain, and then I'm just going to pull it free. So there it is. I take it with my fingernails, or you can use your seam ripper. Don't rip it, just use the little knob of your seam ripper to pull it free, and there we go. So this is the chain, and if I show my cuff like this, you can see that the chain kind of comes off the cuff just like that, and that's going to make things a lot easier for us here. So what we want to do with that is we want to take either our seam ripper or our scissors, and we want to find the bottommost link. That means the link closest to the sweater, and we want to snip right smack dab through the middle of that link. And so I'm seeing that my link is about right here. So I'm just going to take my scissors and snip right through the bottom of that link, just like that. And I'm going to pull this away. And I didn't snip all the way through, so there we go. Okay, and once I do that, I'm just going to take my seam and begin to open it up. I can pull that little braid away, that's fine. And then I just want to pull this strand free from my cuff. So this strand is going to be the one that I can use to unzip my sweater or unzip these seams. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see it happen. Okay, so we're going to take that little strand and we're just going to pull gently, and we are pulling out, and actually that little strand gets looped into part of the sweater here, so we can just pull that out just like that. and then we just continue pulling. And if it gets caught, you just kind of open your seam a little bit with your fingers and pull. Open. An entire strand, so all of this comes free, and you can just collect it, and you don't need this, so you can just toss this out, and you can just continue to pull your pieces apart. So now we have an open seam here, and what's really great about this is by opening or unzipping that seam, we've actually revealed a braid over here that can help us to unzip this seam right here. So we can actually go ahead and just do that right now. So just like I did with the previous little chain that was hanging off the edge of the seam, is I'm going to snip the bottommost link, pull this away, and then just like I did with the others, I'm going to pull this strand. I'm going to just kind of open my, I'm going to pull this apart. Once you get to another seam like this intersecting, that's where you need to go back and start unraveling this seam here so that you can finish taking off the edge. And so now we're going to unzip this sleeve just like we did with the first one. So again, all I want to do is just feel down here on the seam until I can find that little chain link that is woven into the seam. So there it is. It is at the bottom of the cuff. Let's double check, make sure. Yeah. Okay, so now that it is there, I just want to snip right into the middle of the bottommost link, just like that. Okay, so now I'm just going to open my seam, get rid of that. Just open my seam gently until my little strand that's going to help me unzip comes loose, and it's from the back of the seam. It's right there. Now I'm just going to gently pull. So we have one ribbed hem right here that we can get rid of. We have our seam, which is separated from the other side of the sweater. So now we just want to finish getting rid of the hem. So we have our neck right here and our seams that separate the front and the back of the sweater, as well as the seams that separate the sleeve of the sweater. So we're going to need to do some work there. So right here I noticed that I have some chains. I want to take this one, zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to just snip right in the middle of the lower link. Oops. Just like that. I just want to kind of open my seam until I feel it give way. Okay, so that's giving me a little bit of trouble right here. And so I think what I want to do, when that's happened to me before, what I've done is I've gone to the other side of that seam and I've tried it on the other side. And the reason why I did that was because I figured, well, maybe there's a wrong and a right side, or a starting and a finishing point. And so I'm going to try it on this side and see if I have any more luck. Now I'm pulling gently to separate the seams here. I'm at a little crossroads right here, so I just have to be patient. Once you come to these little crossroads of seams, there might be some more work you have to do before you can just continue. And I've noticed that I found some more of these little chain links that are woven into some of the seams that are ultimately going to help me unzip other seams on the sweater. So I'm going to pull those out, because sometimes when they get woven in there, they can block your thread, which is exactly what happened here. So when I pulled those free, these other little crocheted chains here, once I pulled those free, it allowed me to continue to unzip. We completely detached our sleeves. I'm going to leave this off to the side. We've managed to separate it from the rest of the sweater. Let's do the same thing with this next seam right here. We're going to pull free our little crocheted chain. And that one was really easy to pull free, so it's right there. And just like before, I'm going to cut the bottommost link, open up my seam, and there we go. And that is our next sleeve, separated and ready to go. So I'm going to put that off to the side where my other ones are. And now all we have is the front and the back of the sweater. So this is going to be pretty easy now. We just have to separate these seams here and then the one on the other side. And this one looks pretty easy as I'm looking at it. I'm going to zoom in a little. So you can see right here at the end, just like it's waiting for us, is our little chain. And we want to make sure that it's pulled out and it's not woven into anything. And when you do that, you will notice that we have three. Wow. We have 3 of these little chains that are going to be used to help us unravel the sweater. So I am going to choose the one that lines up to the crocheted seam right here, and that's this one. So this one is going to be where I start. I'm going to snip the bottom. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to open my seam, and it already starts to give. So I'm just going to kind of pull it open. Okay, now we are up here at the collar, and that was added separately. So I'm just going to pull my thread through its final loop, just like that, and then it goes away. And then now we have an open seam here, but we still have the collar, and that means we need to do the same thing with the collar seam before we can completely separate these 2 pieces. So let's go ahead and flip around to the other side, do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll do the collar last. Okay, so this end of the seam is giving me some trouble down here. So what I want to do is I want to turn this over, and I want to check out where that seam connects to the collar. This is what I did with one of my other sweaters. I was having an issue on one end of the seam, so I checked the other end. And so I'm noticing right here on this part of the seam that the seam runs all the way up the collar. And so I'm wondering if it would be easier for me to unzip the seam starting from this side. So I'm going to look at the end right here, and I'm going to pull free a little chain. All right, I want to make sure that it comes all the way out the end of the seam. There. Okay, this is probably going to make this a little bit easier. Alright, so that is the chain that I want to work with. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to snip right into the bottommost loop. And I'm going to begin opening. Oh yes, I think this might work, you guys. Okay, so I'm going to begin opening the seam here. I'm looking for that magic thread, and yes, this works. Okay, so that is that. So we have separated the front and the back using the shoulder seam. Now it's just a matter of separating the collar from the rest of the sweater so we can continue to separate these 2 pieces further, because as you can see right here, the 2 at front and the back are still being connected by this part of the collar. So we want to separate this collar. So I'm going to go down to the end of the collar, following the seam all the way down until I get down here, and I'm just following that little crocheted seam all the way down here, and I'm going to pull out a little chain that is tucked up under here, and that's going to help me to release that collar. So let's zoom in a little here. Okay, so we don't need those threads. So here is a little chain right here. I just want to make sure it's completely pulled out and not tucked up under anything anymore. We want it to be free. There's a lot of tucking going on right here. Okay, we're getting somewhere. All right. Let's make sure it's completely free. So now I'm following that little chain, that little V-shaped chain. And this chain right here is the one that I want to cut. Okay, so I just want to come get the bottom loop. I think I got the bottom loop that time. I'm going to start pulling the seam apart. Sometimes if you don't get the bottom loop, you just get a thread that kind of gets hung up in the loops there. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can start pulling my seams apart. And there we go. Okay, so we have front, back, and our two sleeves.